9 months ago, I asked my foster dad why we didn't eat dinner together anymore. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at my foster mom's pregnant belly and said, "Just easier this way." I didn't ask again. This morning, that same man cried in court while a judge terminated his parental rights. It didn't start like this. When Elena first told Marcus she was pregnant, they were still that overly affectionate couple I teased about needing to get a room. They laughed too loud at each other's jokes. They kissed in the kitchen like they were the only two people on earth. It was gross in a way that made me secretly happy. But once her belly began to show, something in Marcus changed. It was slow at first, small things you could almost miss if you weren't paying attention. He stopped sitting next to her on the couch. He avoided brushing against her when walking by. He claimed he was just giving her space. But soon, I noticed the way he looked at her stomach. Not with wonder or excitement. With disgust. At the grocery store, he'd walk several steps ahead, leaving her to carry the bags. If her shirt lifted and stretch marks showed, he'd make a noise like he was going to be sick. Eventually, he told her to wear only baggy clothes around the house. He said he couldn't see her like that. Around his coworkers, he started referring to her as the kid's mom instead of his wife. At a family party, when someone asked about the due date, he just walked away mid-conversation. If someone joked that the baby might have his eyes, his jaw tightened like they'd insulted him. One night, my aunt congratulated him, and he just stared at Elena like she'd ruined his life. At home, it got worse. When Elena needed help putting on her shoes, Marcus stood there watching, that same expression of disgust carved into his face. He started referring to her as she or it. He removed her from the Netflix account, then the bank account, then the phone plan. He began throwing away her mail, doctor appointments, bills, even birthday card from her sister. When she dropped a fork at dinner, he kicked it away. When she choked on water, he didn't even look up. I had to perform the Heimlich maneuver we just learned in health class. When she collapsed in Target, he pretended not to notice. I called for help, and security got an ambulance. He never showed up at the hospital. My birthday came a few weeks later. Elena decorated the kitchen overnight and made pancakes even though she'd barely slept. Marcus walked in and told her, "You need to leave. Either you go or I take him somewhere else. I can't be around you." She looked at him, eyes begging for some shred of kindness. It never came. I tried to run to her. "I want to go with Mom." I cried, clutching her leg. Marcus yanked me back. "No, you're staying." She knelt down, belly heavy, hugged me, and whispered, "Stay and enjoy your party, sweetie. You were too excited not to." I pressed against the window, watching her drive away alone. Later that night, I went to get her favorite cookies from the pantry, planning to sneak them in her nightstand. When I opened the drawer, I found a folded document. It was a paternity test dated 5 months ago. I read the bold line, "Probability of paternity 0%. My hands trembled. That was when Marcus truly started to change. I took Elena's phone, snapped pictures of the results, and shoved the papers back in place. As I jumped into bed, I heard her return. Footsteps slow. Her shadow stopped near the drawer. Then, soft crying. Marcus didn't soften. One morning, he announced I was switching schools, 40 minutes away. When Elena protested, he cut her off. "It's done." At the new school, staff kept remarking how unusual it was to transfer so late in the year. On the bus ride, I memorized every street sign, every turn. At Elena's next doctor appointment, the doctor noticed her bruises and rapid weight loss. I was sent to the waiting room, but I heard the concern in DR. Hoffman's voice. Elena kept repeating that she bruised easily. A few days later, I heard Marcus on the phone in the garage. I used Elena's hidden tablet to record him. He said Elena's family had cut her off, and he still had time to get everything in place since my adoption wasn't finalized. A plan. Something awful. Elena got quieter, more tired. She knitted a baby blanket slowly, wincing with every move. One weekend, she pulled out baby clothes and buried a onesie that said "Daddy's Girl" deep in a drawer. Then one morning, Marcus made her sign papers at the kitchen table. Her face went pale. "Does this give you full custody of him if we separate?" she asked. "Just sign it," he said. When Elena was at her weakest, I started helping her in secret, I brought vitamins Marcus had thrown away, snacks hidden in my backpack, little notes saying for you and the baby. At school, I stayed after class and told Mrs. Smith I was worried about Elena. She gave me her personal number. Call me if you ever need help. Things escalated. Marcus replaced all the bedroom door locks with ones that locked from the outside. He kept the keys on his chain. When Elena started having contractions at 34 weeks, Marcus stood there saying she was being dramatic. I called 911. At the hospital, nurses whispered about malnutrition, dehydration, and stress. I memorized every word. Grace visited Elena against Marcus' orders and promised to help. Marcus stormed in, shouting, but Grace stayed calm and recorded everything. Elena sobbed, hooked to machines. 2 days later, she was forced to sign more documents before discharge. Child services came to school, but Marcus blocked the interview. I found Elena's family online, posts from her mom begging to hear from her. Marcus had been deleting texts and blocking calls. She had no idea. Then came the weekend camping trip. Marcus said it would be just disguise. Elena tried to come. He told her the walking would be too much. Before we left, she slipped something into my backpack. A note. That night, I read it under a flashlight. Her handwriting was shaky, but clear enough. Be brave. The baby's not his. I love you like my own son. The next day, Marcus asked if I'd be okay living with just him. Said Elena wouldn't want me once she had the baby. I played along, heart pounding. When he went to shower, I used his phone to text Mrs. Williams. Elena needs help. Check on her. When we got home, we found Elena on the bathroom floor, in labor. Marcus stepped over her. I called 911. The ambulance came. Marcus refused to ride along. At the hospital, Elena begged me to stay. Marcus wouldn't enter the delivery room, so the nurses let me hold her hand. She squeezed so hard. After 2 hours, the baby was born. Dark skin, curly black hair. Everything made sense. Elena named her Sophia. She asked if I wanted to hold her first. I nodded. Sophia wrapped her tiny fingers around mine. You're her brother now, Elena whispered. Always protect her. I promised. Marcus showed up at the hospital 2 days later. He wouldn't even look at Sophia. When a nurse handed him the birth certificate, he pushed it away. Not mine. Not signing anything, he said loudly. Hoffman tried to talk to him, but he barked, not my problem. Then he grabbed my arm, trying to drag me out of the room. Hospital security stopped him. An hour later, Linda Torres from Child Services walked in with a folder of papers. She wasn't alone. Another woman with glasses came too. They led me to a quiet room. I showed them the photos on my phone. The locks on the bedroom doors. Elena's bruises. The vitamins in the trash. I played the recordings from the tablet where Marcus called Elena names I don't want to repeat. Linda's face got more serious with every file I handed her. Later that day, Grace and James brought me clothes and toys. James had been taking photos of Elena's injuries for months. They showed them to Linda. She didn't say much, just kept writing. The next morning, Marcus returned with a lawyer. The man waved paperwork, claiming Marcus had full custody of me because of Elena's signature. Linda blocked them at the door. There's an open investigation, she said firmly. Marcus started shouting. Security escorted them out again. That night, I was placed with emergency foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They were kind, but I couldn't sleep. I called Mrs. Brown, my teacher, and she promised to check on Elena in the morning. When I saw Elena again, she looked determined. I'm going to fight for you, she whispered. For both of you. She was still recovering, but there was no hesitation in her eyes. In court, Marcus' lawyer argued I should be returned to him. David Park, Elena's new lawyer, presented everything we had. Photos, bruises, bank records. The judge ordered I remain in temporary care during the investigation. Grace and James covered David's fees. Elena gave her statement, and David explained the documents she'd signed were under duress. They didn't count. Every day after that, the Johnsons drove me to see Elena and Sophia. I learned to feed Sophia, to rock her to sleep. The nurses said I was the best big brother. Elena's mom flew in from California after Grace tracked her down. She brought voicemails Marcus had left, threats, demands, warnings to stay away. Elena had never heard them. Marcus had been deleting everything. Rachel, Elena's doctor, came forward with medical records and photos showing Elena's bruises and weight loss. 15 pounds gone during pregnancy. Her anxiety and fear documented in black and white. David recorded everything. I started therapy with a child psychologist. I played with action figures, acting out how Marcus treated Elena, yelling, shoving, ignoring. I knocked down the mom's blockhouse to show what Marcus did. The therapist took notes. Meanwhile, Marcus tried to erase Elena completely. He changed the locks on the house, threw out her clothes, tossed the baby furniture, even her grandmother's rocking chair. Neighbors called the police, but the house was in his name. Grace and James rescued what they could. When Elena left the hospital with Sophia, she had to take a taxi. Marcus had reported her car stolen and had it towed. She stayed in a motel with her mom. That's where she was served divorce papers. Marcus claimed she was unstable, had cheated, and abandoned me. He wanted full custody and emotional damages. Elena sobbed reading it. 2 weeks later, I figured out which motel she was in. I waited until the Johnsons were asleep, then slipped out with my emergency $20. I knocked on her door. She opened it with Sophia in her arms. We stayed up eating sandwiches, taking turns holding the baby. She cried, saying she was sorry for everything. I told her I knew about the paternity test and Marcus' plan. At David's office the next morning, Elena's mom helped her file for custody of both me and Sophia. They submitted evidence of abuse, neglect, and Marcus' financial manipulations. Turns out, he'd been stealing from an inheritance Elena didn't even know she had, over $50,000. Then Marcus' parents got involved. They filed for grandparent rights, claiming Elena was keeping me from them. Grace and James testified that they'd known Marcus was abusive but never stepped in. The judge asked why they never reported anything. They had no answer. Petition denied. But Marcus' parents weren't finished. They tracked down my biological mom and paid her to file for custody. She hadn't seen me in 5 years, but suddenly she wanted me back. Her record was bad, drug arrests, abandonment of other kids, but she still had legal rights. Elena started sleeping on my floor, holding my hand when I had nightmares. CPS investigated my birth mother again. Linda found even more evidence she was unsafe. Meanwhile, Marcus faced criminal charges. I testified. I told them how he ignored Elena's pain, how he threw out her medicine, how he stepped over her while she was in labor. He sat there stone-faced. He was convicted of domestic abuse and violating the restraining order. Sentenced to 18 months. His parents shouted they'd keep fighting. The judge had them escorted out. David filed to terminate Marcus' parental rights. Elena filed to adopt me. I chose my name, Tyler James Park Martinez, one name from each person who truly loved me. That summer, we started to feel like a family. Elena found a job at a daycare that let her bring Sophia. After school, I'd help clean up, play with the toddlers, then walk home with them. Grace and James kept helping with lawyer fees. I went from therapy every week to once a month. Even my therapist said I was healing fast. But then the threats started again. Marcus' parents filed another petition, this time asking for full custody. They claimed Elena was unfit and that she'd coached me to lie. David filed a response, but every motion cost more money. Elena's mom sold her house in California to help. She moved in with us. We rented a bigger apartment, 3 bedrooms, so Sophia and I had our own rooms. Elena looked exhausted. I started making her breakfast, doing the laundry, packing her lunch. She gave me her portion of dinner most nights, pretending she wasn't hungry. I started hiding granola bars in her purse. The custody hearing dragged for months. Marcus' parents had 3 lawyers. We had David and the truth. David showed the judge medical records, my text to them begging for help, and police reports. They claimed they didn't know Marcus was abusive, but the judge cut them off. You failed to protect him, she said. Petition denied. They were ordered to pay Elena's legal fees. For once, Elena smiled in court. We had a picnic the next day, sandwiches, clouds, Sophia crawling in the grass. For an afternoon, we were just a family. 2 weeks before the next court date, Marcus was jumped in prison. News outlets ran with his parents' statements, painting him as a victim. They said Elena had lied. They said she had turned me against them. They said we were stealing a child who was rightfully theirs. We woke up to hate mail in our inbox. Someone spray-painted "baby thief" on our car again. Elena started packing a suitcase in the living room. She said maybe we should run. I unpacked everything and reminded her what she taught me. We don't run from bullies. We name what they did, and we stand our ground. She sank into the couch and cried into her hands. I sat beside her and held her shoulders until her breathing slowed. Grace and James decided enough was enough. They posted proof online. They shared photos of my bruises with my permission. They uploaded videos of Marcus yelling. They posted texts where he admitted to controlling Elena's phone and finances. The tide began to turn. Comments shifted from calling Elena a liar to asking how they could help. Women from Marcus' past came forward. One had hospital records from a broken wrist. Another had a restraining order from college. A third sent messages he wrote telling her no one would believe her. News stations retracted their earlier stories. They invited David to speak. He showed the public the same documents he showed the judge. He said the law was slow, but the truth was patient. I watched Elena breathe a little easier for the first time in months. Linda, our CPS worker, emailed to say her final report was complete. She said our home was stable. She said our home was loving. She said I called Elena Mom naturally without prompting. She said adoption would be in my best interest. The final termination hearing arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Elena ironed my shirt while Sophia smeared applesauce on her own. Elena laughed and changed the baby. We drove to court with the wipers ticking like a heartbeat. Marcus appeared by video in an orange jumpsuit. He said he was a changed man. He said he loved me. He said Elena turned me against him. The judge asked if anyone wanted to speak. I stood up and held the rail so my legs wouldn't shake. He never loved me. He used me to hurt my mom. Elena is my mom. I sat down and stared at my shoes. The judge said she would issue a decision within a week. That week lasted a year inside our bodies. Elena didn't sleep. Her mom cooked soup we barely tasted. I kept Sophia entertained with puff snacks and towers of blocks. On Friday afternoon, David called. His voice was steady but bright. We raced to the courthouse. Elena fumbled her seatbelt in the parking lot. The judge read from her ruling in a clear voice. Parental rights of Marcus are terminated. Reasons include abuse, criminal conviction, abandonment, and failure to support. Elena collapsed into her chair with a sound that was half sob, half relief. I hugged her and felt her shoulders shake. Sophia clapped and laughed as if she understood. In the hallway, Linda pulled out a thin stack of papers. She said we could start the adoption finalization. Grace and James handed over letters they had written. Rachel, the nurse, submitted a statement that Elena had put me first through everything. Mrs. Smith, our neighbor, described Elena teaching me to ride a bike in the parking lot. I helped Elena fill in the blanks with careful block letters. Linda asked me to choose my legal name. I chose Tyler because it felt strong. I chose James for the uncle who protected me. I chose Park for Elena. I chose Martinez for her mother. Linda smiled and said it fit me. 3 months of additional interviews and home visits followed. They looked at the pantry and the medicine cabinet. They looked at report cards and pediatric checkups. They watched how Sophia ran to Elena and how I set the table without being asked. They asked me if I wanted anything to change after adoption. I said I wanted more Saturdays just doing nothing together. They wrote that down like it was a legal goal. Adoption day arrived on a sunlit morning. We dressed Sophia in a yellow dress with daisies. Elena's mom wore a blue scarf that matched my tie. Grace brought cupcakes. James brought his camera. The courtroom was full of people who had said yes when others turned away. The judge asked Elena if she accepted full legal responsibility for me. Elena said yes so loudly that Sophia jumped and then giggled. The judge asked if I wanted Elena to be my mother in every way the law could make real. I said yes before she finished the question. The judge smiled and signed. She let me bang the gavel. Sophia pointed at me and said Tai Tai, her best version of my name. Everyone clapped and cried at the same time. That night, we ate pizza around the coffee table. The box steamed against our knees. I stood up to read a letter I had written. You're not my foster mom or my adoptive mom. You are my mom. You chose me when I was scared. You fought for me when I had no voice. You taught me to stand up even when I was shaking. Elena tried to answer, but cried too hard. She just hugged me until my collar dampened with her tears. 6 months later, we moved into a bigger apartment. We painted Sophia's room pink and mine a shade of blue that looked like fresh sky. Elena's mom took the small bedroom and hung wind chimes on the balcony. Sophia learned to say abuela and spun in circles until she fell laughing. Elena said we weren't a traditional family. Elena said we were a chosen one. I said we were perfect. We planted tomatoes in plastic tubs on the balcony. We tucked sunflowers into a narrow strip of dirt behind the building. We watered them with Sophia's tiny elephant watering can. We told them to grow. They did. In the spring, I won an essay contest about family. I wrote that DNA is a blueprint, but love is the house. I wrote that some houses get built by strangers who decide to stay. I wrote that my house was loud and bright and smelled like cinnamon. Elena framed the certificate and hung it by the door. Every time we left the house, we touched the frame like a lucky charm. A letter arrived from Marcus in a thin white envelope. Elena didn't open it. She turned it in her hand once like it was a strange bird. She said he had no power here anymore. She dropped in the trash and reached for Sophia. She said, let's go plant something instead. We watered the tomatoes until the dark earth shone. We watched a bee bury itself in a sunflower like a small miracle. I started middle school with a backpack that felt less heavy. When kids asked about my dad, I said I didn't have one. I said I had the best mom and the best sister in the world. I said that was enough. Therapy shifted to once a month and then once every other month. My therapist said my nervous system was learning safety. She said healing can be boring, and that was a compliment. On a Tuesday evening, Sophia took 3 wobbly steps from the couch to my arms. Elena's mom filmed it, and everyone screamed like we'd won a championship. Elena whispered, "My babies," with a voice that sounded like prayer. For a school project, I interviewed Elena about her childhood. She told me about sleeping on a pull-out couch with her sister. She told me about studying under streetlights when the power went out. She told me about the first time she felt safe after leaving her own hard home. When I called her my hero, she cried and said I was hers. She said I was brave enough to speak when the truth was heavy. Sophia turned 2 and tried to blow out candles while clapping. We sang the birthday song in English and Spanish because our house is bilingual in love. That night, I hummed lullabies while Sophia fell asleep with one sock half on. Elena watched from the doorway with her hand over her mouth. After Sophia slept, we stood over her crib and whispered we made it. A month later, CPS knocked again because Marcus filed another complaint from prison. An investigator checked the fridge and the medicine and the bedrooms. I showed her my chore chart and the reading log I kept with Elena. She nodded and asked what we were having for dinner. Elena said arroz con pollo, and the investigator laughed that it smelled better than paperwork. 3 weeks later, David called with the official letter. CPS had cleared us again and recommended accelerating any future legal changes. The report said our home was safe and loving. The report said I thrived with Elena. The report said stability looked like pancakes on Saturday and clean sheets on Sunday. We taped that sentence on the fridge because it felt like a poem. Elena's classes for early childhood education restarted after a tough semester. We studied together at the kitchen table. She quizzed me on fractions, and I quizzed her on child development milestones. We made flashcards that smelled like coffee and highlighters. On nights when she looked tired, I slid a granola bar across the table without a word. She smiled the small smile that says we survived something terrible and still made a snack. Marcus' parents tried one last petition. They wanted weekends. They wanted phone calls. They wanted to be the exception to the judge's last order. David filed a response. He attached the old text messages where I begged them for help. He attached the police reports and medical records. At the hearing, the judge looked at them for a long time. She said the law does not award people for standing still while harm happened in front of them. She denied their petition and ordered them to pay fees. We walked out into cold sunlight and felt warm. We celebrated with dollar ice cream cones and sticky hands. Sophia announced cold, with great authority, and insisted her cone were a napkin coat. Elena laughed until she cried again, but this time it was the easy kind. That night, I wrote a list of things our family does now. We eat at the table together. We say please and thank you even when we're tired. We tell the truth even when it's messy. We take pictures when something hurts to prove it happened. We water our plants even when it rains because habit is a kind of hope. We schedule joy like it's a doctor appointment. We end the day with good night, and I love you and see you in the morning. In social studies, we learn the word precedent. It means something that happened before changes what can happen next. I decided to be my own precedent. I decided I would never be the kid who stayed quiet when the door locked from the outside. I decided I would be the kid who keeps spare keys in people's hands. Elena told me that my choices were building a path for Sophia. She said my bravery would be her normal. We went to the park to celebrate nothing and everything. We brought peanut butter sandwiches and a blanket that still smelled like laundry soap. An older woman with a terrier said Sophia, and I had the same stubborn chin. Abuela laughed and said, "They are brother and sister." Elena looked at me and said, "Chosen forever." I thought about the first night Elena decorated for my birthday with no sleep. I thought about the Target floor and the ambulance and the hospital bright as a winter morning. I thought about the courtroom and the gavel and the way Sophia's fingers wrapped around mine. I thought about the letter I wrote and the way Elena cried. I thought about how gardens do not care about bloodlines. They care about water, about sun, about hands that don't give up. Summer turned our balcony tomatoes into small red suns. We sliced them over toast and sprinkled salt like confetti. We called them victory tomatoes. On the first day of 7th grade, Elena tightened my tie and took too many pictures. Sophia stuck a sticker on my backpack and declared it official. Abuela told me to walk like I already belonged because I did. After school, I helped Elena with nap mats at the daycare. Toddlers climbed me like a jungle gym, and I pretended to be a mountain. Elena smiled the tired smile of a working mom who is building a life one shift at a time. When the lights were off and the rooms were quiet, we stood in the doorway and breathed. We were safe. We were home. Back at the apartment, I found an old notebook from the year everything fell apart. On the first page, my handwriting was tiny and afraid. Today Marcus said, "I am not family." On the last page, my handwriting was bigger. Today the judge said, "I am chosen." I tucked the notebook behind the framed adoption certificate near the door. I touched the frame like we always do and heard the soft click of the lock turning for the night. I tucked Sophia into bed and whispered the lullaby Elena taught me. Elena stood beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. We watched Sophia breathe the steady rhythm of a house that holds. Elena kissed my forehead and said, "We made it, Tyler." I said, "We did, Mom." I looked around our living room with the drawings taped to the wall and the toy basket spilling over. I looked at the sunflower seeds drying on a paper towel for next year's planting. I looked at the soft lamp light turning everything gold. This is our story. It is one of choice over blood. It is one of love over cruelty. It is one of 3 people who are not put together by chance, but by 100 decisions to keep going. Elena, Sophia, a family, not because the world gave us permission, but because we decided to be one and then proved it every day we stayed. Ask ChatGPT.